I accepted the invite for a friend's bachelor party. I drank too much and got caught up in the fun. I should never have drank alcohol. I knew what imbibing in drinks meant, but I had accepted the drinks from my friends not knowing they wanted to see my downfall. In my defense, I hadn't known it was alcohol. They wanted to sell me short to my husband. Not they, though, the person I had called my best friend my whole life. She wanted what I had, and her jealousy led to my downfall. I had accepted drink after drink from her, thinking they were non-alcoholic. I should have tasted it. I had blindly trusted in someone that I thought was always going to be in my corner. Now I was facing a lawsuit and divorce, and my whole life had been turned upside down. I really need help on what I can do to reverse the clock. Reverse the clock to the time that bitch and I became friends and make sure it never happened. I had trusted this girl with my life. She was supposed to be my ride or die, but all of a sudden she wanted what was mine and decided that she could throw me to the wind. Was this how friends was supposed to act? Never trust, that's what I'll tell you people on this goddamn internet. Never trust. Here's what had happened. I had followed my friend to a bachelor party because she had said she needed a +1. I had done it without thinking. I just thought my best friend needed help, so I was going to help her. I went without telling my husband, who had gone on a business trip. I had babysitters come to my house to watch over my son. My husband wasn't going to know I had snuck out of the house, and my baby was in safe hands with the babysitters I had hired. I didn't know it had all been a setup, and I had fallen right into the trap. I got to the party with my friend, and she greeted the people she knew, introducing me to all and sundry and saying I was as single as a horse. I told her to stop it, but she continued with the joke. I had forgotten my wedding band at home, and that had made my friend's joke all the more believable. Don't get me wrong, I had taken the band off when I had wanted to take a bath and then had forgotten to put it back on. I truly didn't mean to forget to put it on. I hadn't even known who had been doing the party. I had just known it was a bachelor party thrown for an acquaintance of my friend to celebrate his last single day before he got hitched. You may be wondering if it was a bachelor's party. Then why had chicks that weren't strippers been invited? Yeah, I had been wondering that too. But my friend goes ahead to tell me that the person the bachelor party was being thrown for was gay, and he didn't have any issues with women. My friend was even part of his groom train, and that was why I was her +1 to the party. See, there was nothing weird there. Nothing weird to make me become suspicious of the fact that my best friend wanted to set me up. The party had started out low-key with everyone keeping to themselves. But then my betrayer of a best friend, who was ever the extrovert, got up and took control of the party. She made sure everyone was linked up with someone in the club. I guess I forgot to mention that the party was at a club. Everyone got talking, and then the drinks started flowing. I didn't want to drink because I knew how it was for me when I drank. So when a drink had been pushed to me twice, I had declined. I claimed that I wanted a fruit drink instead, and my best friend had offered to go get it for me. According to her, it was the least she could do since she had dragged me here all the way out of my comfort zone for a party. Again, I hadn't seen anything wrong or weird in the way she was hovering. She had been my best friend. She loved to hover, so I thought everything was normal. It was the process. I drank the mocktails she had claimed were mocktails after I had asked her like 100 times over. It didn't take long for the alcohol to kick in, and everything began to seem blurry. The next thing I knew, I was dancing, and everyone was so hilarious. I couldn't find my friend anywhere, like she had disappeared from the club, and all around me had just been guys. I tried to get away, but the drink had seeped into the part of my brain that processed and interpreted the movement of my limbs, and I remember falling into a guy's lap and laughing at something hilarious that he had said. The next thing I remember was waking up in a bed that wasn't mine, and I found my husband glaring at me from above. I looked around, and my surroundings weren't looking familiar, so how come I was here? I had been so confused, and my husband had not offered any answers, just shook his head and walked out on me. I had made to follow him, LOL. This was when I realized that I was completely naked and horror gripped my body. It was then I became aware of the situation and what my husband must have seen. I was supposed to be home taking care of our son, but I was in an unknown house completely naked in a stranger's bed, and my husband had caught me. It looked like I had cheated on my husband. Well, I had no idea if I had actually cheated because I didn't know what had happened. I had taken a couple of drinks I had thought were non-alcoholic, and I became drunk and must have done something based on the looks of the bedroom, and my husband had caught me. Oh God. Back at that moment in time, I hadn't known it had all been a setup. I didn't know my best friend had taken me to the house and made it look like I had slept with another man. What had been in my head at that time was finding my clothes and running after my husband to explain to him that he had seen something wrong. I managed to find my clothes strewn around the room and got home to find my things waiting for me outside, and a phone that had an open me note stuck to it. I turned on the phone and I found a video of myself dancing with random men at the bachelor party and being careless and twerking on them and slamming down drinks like a total wanton. Like I was completely carefree. I hadn't behaved like a married woman at all. I had behaved like a prostitute that was just imbibing her first wine. I ran to the door and began banging it down, but after about 30 minutes of knocking, neighbors began to peep out from their houses, and I even saw one taking out her phone to dial. I had to move then. The Uber ride to my best friend's house, I began thinking whether it was my best friend that had planned the whole thing. She hadn't called me to ask how I was doing after the party, and she was the only one that knew my whereabouts to call my husband. I got to her house hoping to confront her, but I barged into her bedroom and found her deep asleep with her clothes from last night still on. It didn't look like she had been plotting my downfall, so I woke her up with force and she was surprised to see me at her house. When she had taken her coffee and I told her all that had happened just this morning and the way she acted, you wouldn't even have believed her capable of hurting a fly. If only I knew better. If only I hadn't been such a naive fool. My friend had told me that she couldn't remember what had happened on the bachelor party night either. Hell, she even went ahead to say she had no idea how she had gotten home. She was my best friend, and I had known her more than anyone in my life, so I believed her because I had thought that she was the one person that would be led by loyalty to be on my side. I got to witness the stark truth of her betrayal. My best friend told me I could stay at her place while I tried to get myself together and find how to get my husband back. That's what I tried to do. I wanted to get my husband back because I loved him. I wanted to see my son again. I hadn't even been given a chance to see him one last time. I did everything I could think of. I went by his office and demanded an audience with him, but after 3 days of stopping by to see him to no avail, he ordered his security guys to stop me from entering his office building whenever I got near. I had been so embarrassed when 2 guys had to escort me back to my car after a failed attempt to see my husband. When that didn't work, I reduced myself to stalking out the house to watch whenever he got back from work so I could approach him and plead my case. I stayed out and I hadn't showered for 2 nights just because I was watching my marital home like a spy. My husband got back to the house on the 3rd night of my watch, but my son hadn't been with him. I was stinking, but I had been determined. I ran to him, and before I got to him, he had shut the door in my face. I came by the house the next day and waited till it was dark out, and there had been no signs of my husband or son. It was like the place was empty. I went to go and check it out and discovered that the place was indeed empty. My husband had moved out with my son. I broke down in tears that day. My sim was my life, and my husband was searing contact between us. I got back to my best friend's home, and she had been waiting for me outside. You guys would keel over if you heard why my so-called best friend had been waiting for me outside to get back. According to her, I had finished her cereal, and she didn't like it. The witch hadn't even waited for us to get inside her house. She had just laid it out on me right in the yard. I was so mad because of the frustration and yelled at her, and this witch ordered me to leave her house that she had tolerated my ass enough. This was someone who I had taken into my home. If she came into my home, she could have anything she wanted, and here she was, kicking me out over a finished cereal that I had planned to get a new one. To say I was shocked was an understatement. I was slapped with surprise by her actions. But I guess I should have seen it coming. I really should have seen it coming. During my stay, it was like she was edgy, always wanting to know my every move, always following me around her house and putting back things into place that I had taken even though I put them back. She would claim that I hadn't gotten the positioning right, and she had finally had enough that she wanted to throw me out of her house. I went with my dignity, Lowell. Never in 1,000 years did I expect this from her. I remember when I had become friends with her in high school when she was a new transfer student eating alone on her table. I had also kind of been a loner in my school, so I had decided to make her my friend so we could be together. We became fast friends. I'm 28 years old, and that means I've been friends with her for more than 11 years. We went to the same college, had been in the same sorority group, and everyone knew us as inseparable friends. This God's forsaken fool had also been with me when I had met my husband. I'm half British, so the way I curse is different from you folks, seeing as I had been raised by my grandmother. Let me tell you the funny story of how I met my husband. My husband is 32 years old and studied business analytics at our university, Pepperdine University. However, he had graduated by the time we met, through a date. My best friend was the one that was supposed to G on the date. I know it all sounds cliche, but this was what had happened. She didn't want to go on the date and begged me, even though I also didn't want to go. She begged me to go in her stead, that she would do the chores for a week, and my best friend had hated chores back then, so I knew she really didn't want to go to meet with this guy. I went for the date, and that was how I met my husband. We talked, and although I didn't like him at first because there was this other guy that had my attention, He was sweet. We exchanged numbers and we talked on occasion and went out randomly. He showed up for my graduation from college, and after a week or two, he asked me to be his girlfriend. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. I agreed to go out with him, and my best friend had no issues about it. She was even strongly behind our relationship and said she had dropped my soulmate right into my hands. I guess I owed her that much for not going for the date that day. But let me confess, I never really liked my husband in the first years of dating. He was commanding and always told me what to do. It was like he was an alpha boss, and I didn't like someone telling me what to do, but I stayed. Why I stayed? I have no idea. I just know I did, and after 2 years of dating, he asked me to marry him. Our wedding was great and exceptional, and our honeymoon was even more gold. My husband had money and knew how to spend it on people he loved the most, and from how much he spent on me, it showed he loved me. I'm not trying to base my marriage on money, don't get me wrong. All was well in our world. I gave birth to my son 2 years into our marriage, and we tried for a girl, but after 2 attempts, we stopped. Guess my son was the only gift in the form of children from God, and my husband had no issues about that either. My marriage to him had been perfect. There had been minor quarrels, but it had been quickly resolved, and we had no problems. I grew to love him when he proved time and time again that he had my back. There was nothing I wouldn't do for him. He helped my friends when they were in need. He placed anyone I loved in top priority. The man treated me like an eggshell, and then this great temptation decided to wreck my marriage. Why had I followed my best friend for that bachelor party? I could have just stayed home and curled up with a good movie, but I was looking for a hotel to book into because the best friend that had caused all these in the first place had kicked me out. I would do anything for that witch if she had been the one in my shoes. I could have done anything for her. Hell, I did do anything for her. Even when she suggested we do a very bad thing against my husband. I had been by her side and supported her. My best friend had come to me when she had a problem and needed money to fix her issues, and I had given her. From her mother was in the hospital to her family needed money to complete their rent deposit. I gave her every time she asked without telling my husband, but that hadn't been enough. She had come to me with a business proposal saying that we could set up a flower shop and she would be getting all the profit and I'll just be getting a measly 10%. Meanwhile, I was the one that contributed all the money. I told her I couldn't do that, and she began behaving off towards me. This was why, when she had called me up for the bachelor party, I had gone with her thinking we were making amends. I thought that all was right in my friendship world again until she kicked me out of my house. I didn't know this was to be the least of my problems. I got to know I was in big soup when I tried to pay for my room with my card and my access was denied. This was when I realized shit had gotten real. My husband had blocked all access to his account. Now that wasn't fair in the slightest because I also had money in that account. How could he do that to me? I had purchased a new phone, and while I was still thinking of what to do, I got a call from my best friend that there was someone in her house who wanted to see me. I had to walk to her house because I had no cash to pay for an Uber. My situation was so laughable, and it pained me because I was suffering this without knowing who had been at fault. The house I woke up in had no owner. The drinks that had alcohol in them had probably been put in by one of the men at the bachelor party. I didn't know it was my best friend that had done everything as it then. I got to her house and found my husband's lawyer waiting for me. I had been all sweaty from the trek, and my best friend had the gall to laugh at me. It began to dawn on me that she really didn't mean well for me. I was a fool to have trusted her. My husband's lawyer gave me divorce papers and told me that I had no right to any of his accounts again, and that I needed to sign some papers to remove my name from account beneficiary. Then the one that shocked me the most was when he said I needed to sign over custody of my child to him, meaning I wouldn't have any claim on my child, nor would I have any claim on his money. I got livid and demanded that I must see my husband if I was to sign the divorce papers. It wasn't fair to me that he wanted to do all these to me without asking me why or what had actually happened that night. He was jumping into conclusions and wanted to ruin my marriage. The lawyer said that wouldn't be possible, and I told him that I wasn't going to hand over custody of my child, nor would I sign any divorce papers. He was stripping me bare. I didn't have anything again to look forward to in life. My grandmother was dead. My son was the only family I had, and my husband wanted to take that away from me, all because I had been too drunk to realize what I was doing at a party. The lawyer sighed and wrote down the address and told me when I should come by the house on the day he would be there so we could settle the case amicably. Obviously, I didn't listen, and that was when the whole truth cleared before my eyes. I went to my husband's house 2 days before the proposed date, and what I saw shocked me to my bone marrow. My best friend was riding my husband in my marital bed, and they saw me and kept on at it with my best friend giving me a smirk while shouting at me to give them some privacy. I wanted to run away from there, but I couldn't run. My son wasn't in the house, and if I wanted to run, I would have done it with him. Everything my best friend did and said finally replayed back in my head. How she always claimed she was the one that had given me my husband. How she felt entitled to his money. How she always thought she could control me in my home. The drinks at the bachelor party, she had brought them straight from the bartender, so there was no way that any of the men at the bachelor party had put drugs in it. When they finally came out, my husband dropped an envelope in front of me and I opened it. This was when I realized that my best friend had stabbed me in the heart. She stabbed me with a sharp knife and something I would never be able to recover from. It was a DNA test saying my son wasn't my husband's. Yes, that was true, Redditors. But that doesn't matter, or it didn't matter back then. He was my husband's son by heart. My husband had been there when I pushed him out and everything. I had been in love with another man when I married my husband, and yes, at the beginning I had married my husband for the money, but it wasn't my fault. I needed to taste the luxurious life and still feel love. I guess I wanted to eat my cake and have it. And I had successfully done that until my best friend ripped my wound out in the open. I tried to get down on my knees and explain to him that it hadn't been like that I loved him and was ready to do anything for him when he brought out another envelope and gave it to me. Before you guys judge me, I was under the mental influence of my best friend and my lover then. They had led me to believe I could take my husband's money and run away, but I stopped when I found that I loved my husband. I didn't go through with the plan that my best friend had come up with to move some of my husband's money to an account and then run away. I had been a beneficiary of 2 of his accounts, and my husband didn't care what I did with his money. So my best friend had come up with the idea to move some of the money to an unknown account and then run away. And then we split the money. I saw in the envelope the account name and number of the unknown account, and inside was a phone recording of our plans. My best friend had made it sound like it was my idea and she was just playing along. There was nothing I could do or say to redeem myself in front of my husband's eyes. I begged, and yet he was unmoved. Had what I had done been so grave? I gave him a child, didn't I? Even though it wasn't his, didn't every man want a child? I took the divorce papers and had been about to leave his house when I heard police sirens at the front door. He had called the police on me, when I hadn't done anything. According to him, the only way I could get the police off my back was if I signed the divorce papers and signed over custody of my son. I signed the documents because I didn't want to end up in prison. I didn't even know stealing his money could land me in prison. I hadn't even been thinking. After I signed the divorce papers, my ex-husband now showed me that I had been a fool. He didn't call back the police, but called them in to arrest me and my best friend. A befitting end, some of you might think, but karma wasn't done with me. My best friend went into hiding after she had been questioned the first time for her fraudulent activities, leaving only me to be under police scrutiny. Luckily, I hadn't done anything, and I had told them the truth. The account wasn't signed under my name, and I got off with community service for 3 weeks. I had been a victim, and I had learned my lesson big time. I hope you guys learn never to trust people. Yes, I had done some pretty terrible things, but I was getting slapped for that now. Hopefully I make it out of this regression period in my life. I want my husband back. Update, I'm good now and I vow never to do anyone evil anymore. I'm working for what I have, but I just told my story so you all would be careful of who you trust. I don't need to get my husband back, but if there's any way I can get suggestions and tips on how to plead to get back into my son's life, that would be much appreciated.